Who remembers this awesome console? There is something wonderfully peculiar about the Sega Master System, a console that never quite knew whether it wanted to be a global superstar or a cult favourite, and somehow managed to become both, depending entirely on which part of the world you were standing in. Here in Britain, it was mostly the scrappy budget alternative to the Sega Mega Drive, whispered about in magazines and huddled around in bedrooms, beloved by a select few who knew its secrets. But elsewhere, Brazil most famously, it became a cultural juggernaut so unstoppable that it outlived hardware generations, economic cycles, and even Sega's own interest in supporting it. Few consoles can claim to have been both a forgotten relic and a national pastime simultaneously. Yeah, to talk about the Master System purely in terms of market share is to miss the point entirely, because this console's legacy lives not in spreadsheets but in sensation. The crisp, impossibly bright colour palette, the oddly elegant lines of the hardware, the bouncy, unmistakably Sega energy pulsating through games like Alex Kidd in Miracle World and Wonder Boy 3. This was a machine that punched far above its weight, a system that gave developers just enough horsepower to attempt something ambitious, but not enough to hide behind visual excess. The Master System demanded creativity, and in return, it rewarded players with a library that felt intimate, crafted, and occasionally shockingly inventive. So today on Lady Arcade, let's crack open this deceptively simple box and explore why its legacy is more important in 2025 than you might think. Because the Master System is not just a console, it's a prism through which we can see an entire era of gaming history with fresh clarity, a reminder of what developers could achieve when the tools were limited but the imagination was not. And whether you grew up with one plugged into a tiny bedroom telly or you're discovering it for the first time with the benefit of hindsight, the Master System still stands as proof that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums softly in 8-bit. So let's celebrate this classic console right now. Some consoles define an era, others disappear into the shadows of giants remembered only by the people who grew up with them, cherished quietly and without fanfare. The way one might treasure an old photograph or a melody whose origin is long forgotten. And then there are those strange machines that seem to exist in the borderlands of gaming history, consoles that never quite found their moment yet somehow refused to die, lingering in pockets of the world like stubborn embers that refuse to go out. Among these, few are as mysterious, as resilient, or as quietly beloved as the Sega Master System. If the golden age of the NES is a story engraved in stone, endlessly retold, the tale of the Master System is something far more delicate, a tapestry woven from different colours depending on where you lived. A console that was a failure in one country, a hero in another, and a cultural phenomenon in a third. It is a machine defined not by a singular legacy, but by the astonishing diversity of the lives it lived, waiting patiently for history to catch up with it. Even today, its outline shimmers at the fringes of gaming memory, asking those who care to look just a little closer, to listen a little more carefully, because the story it carries is far richer than the fate the market once assigned to it. But to understand what the Master System truly was, we must return to the tumultuous world it was born into. So let's head back to the beginning. The mid-1980s gaming landscape was a place reshaped by the American video game crash, a moment that left scars on the industry both deep and lasting. In the United States, the term video game had become almost synonymous with disappointment. Cheap cartridges spilling from bargain bins, toy aisles filled with consoles no retailer wanted to touch, and analysts confidently proclaiming that interactive entertainment had been nothing more than a passing fancy. Even as Japan watched its own vibrant market flourish with the Famicom, North America saw only a graveyard of broken promises. Into this fractured world, of course, stepped Nintendo, cautious yet determined, transforming the humble Famicom into the Nintendo Entertainment System and selling it not as a console but as a toy, a trustworthy piece of family technology meant to gently coax traumatized consumers back towards gaming. You all know this story by now. The strategy succeeded beyond imagination, and in one swift motion, the NES lumped across the landscape like a colossus, reshaping the industry in its image. Its success was not just financial, it was cultural, social, and infrastructural, establishing retail agreements that would seal the American market tight for years. So when Sega, then riding high on its arcade credentials and early successes with the SG-1000 and the Mark III in Japan, looked across the ocean towards the United States, it did not find opportunity waiting for it, but a fortress. Nintendo had claimed the kingdom, and its walls were impossibly high. Yet, Sega tried anyway, driven by a conviction that its hardware was something special, something worthy of standing beside or perhaps even above its rival. The Mark III, the system that would become the Master System, was a marvel of engineering for its time, boasting brighter colours, larger sprites, and a distinctive audio character that, when paired with the optional FM sound unit in Japan, could produce tones of a remarkable warmth and richness. When Nintendo leaned into softness and comfort, Sega presented sleek lines and futuristic austerity, a hint of the arcade distilled into a machine for the living room. Even now, when one holds the original Japanese Mark III or the Western Master System, there is a sense that this was hardware designed by people who cared deeply about the craft, about beauty, proportion, and the quiet dignity of good engineering. But as is so often the case, excellence in design could not protect the system from the brutal realities of the marketplace. If the Master System's early years in Japan were respectable, its American birth was something altogether stranger. Sega, wary of its own limited distribution experience in the United States, entrusted the console to Tonka. Yeah, the toy company Tonka, a decision that has become one of the greatest cautionary tales of gaming history. Tonka understood trucks, construction toys, and the wonder of childhood imagination, but video games were a different universe entirely, a world they wandered into with the best of intentions and almost no comprehension of what was needed. Where Nintendo brought discipline, control, and a masterclass in retail psychology, Tonka brought confusion. Games were mismarketed, release schedules were inconsistent, and their promotional materials often seemed uncertain about what kind of audience the Master System was meant to reach. Despite reportedly spending tens of millions of dollars attempting to establish the brand, Tonka lacked both the expertise and the industry leverage required to break through Nintendo's iron grip on American retail. Stores already bound by restrictive licensing agreements had little incentive to risk their relationship with the market leader by supporting an alternative backed by a manufacturer with no real electronic pedigree. And consumers, well, most of them never even realised that Sega was offering an alternative at all. The result was not a quiet failure, but a kind of invisible one, a collapse that happened in the shadows. The Master System in the United States simply passed people by, not because it lacked the power to compete, but because it never really had the chance to be seen. It is a strange irony that in a country where the Master System's story reads like a fading margin note, in other parts of the world its presence, though, was anything but marginal. Europe, for example, with its unique blend of gaming cultures, home computers in the UK and Germany, consoles in France, a mixture of both in Spain and Italy, proved to be fertile ground for Sega's machine. Here, the Master System was not an afterthought, but a revelation, often arriving as a family's first true console, a gateway into the vivid world of 8-bit fantasy at a time when the NES remained expensive, uncommon, or poorly distributed. In Britain especially, the Master System 2 became a fixture of childhood, appearing in catalogues, high street shops, rental clubs, and living rooms with a presence that felt warm, dependable, and distinctly its own. The fact of the matter is that European children did not compare it to the NES because, for many of them, the NES simply did not exist. Instead, they measured it against the ZX Spectrums, Amstrads, and Commodore 64s that filled their bedrooms, and in that environment, the Master System felt miraculous, with instant loading, colourful graphics, recognisable characters, and a sense of solidarity that contrasted beautifully with the fragility of cassette tapes and keyboard membranes. Due to this, the console quietly gathered a devoted following simply by being accessible, attractive, and consistently impressive. Its catalogue in this region flourished, with developers tailoring unique experiences to the European markets, and players forming attachments to games that would pass unnoticed elsewhere. For many in the UK and France, the Master System was not a relic overshadowed by Nintendo, it was childhood, glowing warmly in the background of memory, humming with the innocence of late nights spent exploring pixelated worlds. But even Europe's affection, strong as it was, could not compare to the extraordinary story that unfolded thousands of miles away in a country where the Master System would achieve something close to immortality. Brazil, a land whose gaming story follows rhythms almost entirely its own, shaped by import tariffs, economic realities, and a young nation's hunger for accessible play, offers up the craziest Master System tale around. Tectoy, the Brazilian electronics company that's partnered with Sega, took the Master System and gave it a second life, then a third, and then a fourth. They localised games with care and cultural sensitivity, created entirely new titles for the Brazilian audience, redesigned consoles, and continued production long after the rest of the world had moved on. While North America left the Master System behind in favour of the Genesis, and Japan turned its attention towards the Mega Drive and beyond, Brazil embraced the Master System with a devotion that turned it into a national icon. Children born in the late 1980s, the early 1990s, or even the 2000s grew up with the Master System as their home companion. New hardware revisions appeared on store shelves, updated libraries emerged, games were developed domestically, and incredibly to this day, Tectoy still produces Master System units, a testament not just to nostalgia but to the enduring practicality and charm of Sega's design. It's here that the Master System stops being a simple console and becomes something more abstract, more resonant, a cultural artifact, a shared memory, a quiet thread connecting both generations and continents. Few consoles have ever enjoyed such a long and devoted afterlife, and fewer still have managed to become, in one country at least, a tradition. And so we return, as all console histories eventually must, to the hardware itself, not as a collection of numbers or specifications, but as a work of engineering shaped by intention, ambition, and occasional eccentricity. The Master System, in both its Mark III origins and its Western form, was undeniably more powerful than its Nintendo rival. It boasted a palette capable of rich colours, sprite capabilities allowing for cleaner movement, and a sound architecture that, in Japan, could be elevated dramatically through FM synthesis. On the original Mark III, this richer audio was provided by the external FM sound unit I mentioned earlier, but when Sega released the redesigned Japanese Master System in late 1987, the Yamaha YM2413 chip was built directly into the console itself, allowing games to sing with a warmth and clarity that Western audiences never officially experienced. Play a supported game with FM sound today and you hear the console's soul emerge. Some Western cartridges, such as Wonder Boy 3, still contain dormant FM data waiting to be awakened, while others, most famously Phantasy Star outside Japan, had their FM tracks removed entirely to make room for translated text. It is a glimpse into the alternate future Sega might have enjoyed had FM sound been standard worldwide, a future where Master System's audio identity could stand proudly beside the Famicom's. Yet, the console was also home to quirks that shaped the experiences of those who grew up with it. The pause button, infamously placed on the console itself rather than the controller, required players to lean forward mid-action, disrupt their flow, and physically approach the machine just to catch their breath. It's easy to mock this decision today, yet there is something strangely intimate about it, as though the console required your presence, your touch, your acknowledgement, even in moments meant for stillness. And then there was the Sega Scope 3D glasses, bold, experimental, perhaps a little impractical, but undeniably ahead of their time. Before the Virtual Boy, before modern VR, Sega offered players a glimpse into stereoscopic play on a humble 8-bit machine. They were fragile, expensive, and magical. Even the console's physical design contributed to its aura, angular, confident, futuristic, more akin to a piece of high-end audio equipment than a child's plaything. Where Nintendo softened its corners and smiled invitingly at families, Sega presented something sharp and self-assured, a machine that spoke not of toys, but of technology. But, of course, no console endures without its games, and the Master System's library, though smaller than some of its peers, possesses an identity as striking and varied as the cultures that embraced it. So let's talk about some of them. Consider Alex Kidd in Miracle World, a game that once served as Sega's answer to Super Mario Bros., yet carried a tone entirely its own. Whimsical, adventurous, tinged with an offbeat charm that made its world feel vast and unpredictable despite the Master System's modest hardware. Rather than sprinting through tightly curated obstacle courses, Alex wandered, punched blocks, swam through submerged temples, climbed mountainsides, and occasionally risked everything on gloriously daft games of rock, paper, scissors. It was a platformer that dared to be eccentric, and in doing so it carved out a personality distinct from anything Nintendo was offering at the time. What really made Miracle World iconic, though, was its place inside the Master System. On later revisions of the console, the game wasn't merely bundled, it was built directly into the system's memory, waiting patiently behind the power switch like a hidden treasure. A generation of players didn't so much discover Alex Kidd as inherit him the moment their console flickered to life. That accessibility helped shape the identity of Sega's early fanbase. In fact, for many European players, Alex Kidd was the face of Sega long before Sonic's quills ever brushed a screen. His world, with its strange shops, sudden difficulty spikes, and jank and match boss battles, symbolised a time when Sega's design philosophy felt experimental rather than corporate, and bold rather than branded. Even today, revisiting Miracle World feels like dipping back into an era when mascots didn't have to be slick or market tested to leave a mark. They simply needed charm, heart, and just enough weirdness to make children whisper about secret rooms and hidden treasures in the playground. Phantasy Star is a game so astonishing in scope that one must occasionally pause and remind oneself it was an 8-bit title at all. At a time when most RPGs were content to remain grounded in familiar medieval fantasies, Phantasy Star offered something altogether stranger and grander, a solar system spanning adventure framed by crisp anime portraits, richly rendered towns, and labyrinthine first-person dungeons that felt impossibly advanced for a machine better known for simple platformers. Supported by the rare luxury of battery-packed saving, no passwords, no compromises, it invited players to lose themselves in a world that felt far bigger than the Master System had any right to contain. Its presentation alone set it apart. The smooth transitions into 3D-style dungeon corridors, the expressive character art, and the confident blend of science fiction and fantasy created an atmosphere that was both exotic and immersive. For players in the late 80s, this wasn't just another RPG, it was a revelation. Phantasy Star treated its audience with uncommon respect, trusting them to follow a complex plot involving rebellion, tyranny, ancient magic, alien planets, and the quiet grief of its protagonist, all conveyed with a level of cinematic flair that many 16-bit titles would later struggle to match. It radiates ambition, intelligence, and a quiet kind of beauty. Revisiting Phantasy Star is like opening a sealed time capsule and finding technology from the future tucked inside, an unmistakable reminder that creativity can thrive even under tight technical constraints. In doing so, they created one of the Master System's most enduring achievements, a game that still feels a visionary nearly 4 decades on. Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap is a masterpiece of a genre evolution whose emotional resonance and inventive transformations elevated it far beyond the expectations of its time. What began as a relatively traditional arcade lineage blossomed here into something deeper, richer, and remarkably ahead of the curve. A true proto-Metroidvania before the term had even been crystallised. The moment the game opens with your hero already cursed, stripped of humanity and forced into a cycle of magical transformations, it becomes clear that you're stepping into a world that has ambitions far beyond simple platforming. What makes the Dragon's Trap so special is the sheer craftsmanship poured into every corner of its world. Levels interlock in clever, surprising ways, secrets lie just out of reach until the right form unlocks them, and the progression feels almost organic, as though the world is reshaping itself around your character's evolving identity. The soundtrack, full of melancholy undertones and triumphant flourishes, reinforces the idea that this cursed hero's quest feels hand-tooled, lovingly assembled, and impossibly vibrant for its era. Even now, Wonder Boy 3 stands as one of the finest titles of the entire 8-bit generation. Playing it today brings the same sense of warmth and wonder it inspired decades ago, reminding us that innovation does not always demand polygon counts or teraflops, only imagination and the courage to do something different. Master of Darkness, a gothic fever dream with atmosphere thick enough to taste, stands as one of the most striking surprises in the Master System's later library. Clearly inspired by Castlevania, yet never content to just be a simple imitation, it leans into its Victorian horror aesthetic with relish. Mist-soaked streets, occult rituals, blood-red moons, and a London that feels suspended somewhere between nightmare and folklore. Its pacing is sharper than one might expect from an 8-bit action title, but its level design is confident, and its soundtrack is unexpectedly moody, creating an ambience that lingers long after the gameplay ends. It's the kind of game that makes you sit up a little straighter, realising that even late in the console's life, Sega developers were still capable of conjuring something atmospheric, polished, and genuinely unsettling. The crisp sprite work, the deliberate enemy placement, and the slightly theatrical tone all contribute to a sense that this is a hidden classic, a game that deserved far more recognition than it ever received. For many players discovering it decades later, it feels less like an overlooked footnote and more like a lost treasure, proof that the Master System's twilight years were bursting with creativity. Golden Axe Warrior shines as one of the Master System's most fascinating late-generation surprises, a game that, at first glance, seems to borrow unabashedly from The Legend of Zelda, yet ultimately becomes something richer and more distinctive than a simple imitation. Yes, the overhead perspective, a sprawling overworld, and a dungeon-crawling structure clearly echo Nintendo's epoch-defining classic, but Golden Axe Warrior layers these familiar foundations with its own identity, rooted firmly in the lore and aesthetics of Sega's Golden Axe universe. Instead of a silent, woodland hero, you're venturing through a world steeped in barbarian fantasy, battling alongside centaurs, ogres, and fiendish magic users, with a tone that feels harsher, grittier, and unmistakably Sega. The game is far more sprawling than most players expected, filled with cleverly hidden secrets, labyrinthine dungeons, and a difficulty curve that demands patience, exploration, and a genuine mastery. While Zelda offered freedom and mystery, Golden Axe Warrior offers density and challenge, a tighter, more intense take on the formula, backed by a surprisingly emotional soundtrack that leans into its sword and sorcery roots. For many Master System fans, it stands not just as Sega's answer to Zelda, but as one of the finest action-adventure titles of its era, a bold reminder that great ideas can be reinterpreted, transformed, and reimagined into something every bit as captivating in its own right. Sonic's arrival on the Master System marked a fascinating parallel history, a sort of alternate universe where Sega's mascot wasn't defined by blistering speed alone, but by smart level design, charming aesthetics, and a more exploratory spirit. Sonic the Hedgehog on the Master System was not a downsized port of the Mega Drive classic, but an entirely original game built from the ground up, with unique zones, bespoke mechanics, and a gentler pace that suited the hardware beautifully. Its vibrant colour palette, catchy FM rearrangements and memorable moments such as the bridge collapse in Bridge Zone or the now iconic scrolling level set to one of the most soothing tracks in Sonic history made it clear that Sonic could flourish even without blast processing behind him. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the system took this foundation and pushed it into something far more ambitious, darker, trickier, and famously more punishing. This was the game that dared to open with Sonic being catapulted skyward on a hang glider, only to send players plunging through some of the most dramatic and hazard-filled zones the 8-bit hardware ever hosted. Its level design was tighter, its traps crueler, and its sense of progression more cinematic. It's also the game that introduced the tragic framing device of Sonic rescuing Tails, whose absence at the outset gave the adventure an unexpected emotional weight. Despite its difficulty spikes, or perhaps because of them, it remains one of the most unforgettable entries in the entire 8-bit Sonic catalogue. By the time Sonic Chaos arrived, the Master System had matured into a platform perfectly capable of hosting a more refined, more polished take on a Sega's mascot. Faster, smoother and more colourful than its predecessors, it introduced playable Tails, new power-ups and more forgiving level design, resulting in a game that felt energetic without losing the thoughtful pacing that defined 8-bit Sonic. Many fans consider it the most successful and well-rounded of the trilogy, a joyful synthesis of what came before, proving once more that the Master System wasn't merely hosting scaled-down imitations of Mega Drive classics, but cultivating its own proud branch of Sonic's history. This library is not massive, but it is meaningful. It whispers rather than shouts, offering a curated journey through a period when experimentation thrived and developers were unafraid to stretch the limits of modest hardware in pursuit of something magical. But most importantly, it's jolly good fun. So, looking at the system's library, its turbulent history, what does it mean to play the Master System in 2025? Not merely to emulate it, nor to view it through the haze of nostalgia, but to truly engage with it as a living piece of history. There are practical considerations, of course, the kind best spoken softly as though not to disturb the memories resting beneath them. The PAL versions of many of the games run at 50 Hz, their motion slowed, their music softened, lending them a slightly dreamlike quality that players adore and others find alien after years of crisp emulation. The FM sound, accessible primarily through Japanese or modified hardware, remains one of the most rewarding ways to experience a system, especially in the cases of games whose FM music data survived Western cartridges, a reminder of how rich the 8-bit soundscape could have been. There are, of course, also EverDrives for those who wish to explore the library fully, modern HDMI solutions for those seeking clarity, and of course, the Analog Pocket and Mr., both of which capture the Master System's nuances with extraordinary fidelity. But these details, while helpful, are not at the heart of the matter. To play the Master System today is to rediscover a console that never demanded attention but earned affection. A console that thrived not through dominance but through endurance. A console whose identity was shaped not by marketing budgets or market share but by the devotion of the people who found themselves growing up alongside it. I think it's more than fair to say that in the end, the story of the Sega Master System is not a tale of success or failure in the conventional sense. It is a mosaic, a constellation of experiences scattered across continents, shaped by economics, culture and circumstance. In one place, it is a forgotten challenger. In another, it is a childhood touchstone. In Brazil, it is nothing less than a legend. Few consoles have lived such varied and meaningful lives, and fewer still invite us to explore them with the sense of gentle curiosity and wonder that the Master System inspires. It may not have won the war, but wars are a shallow metric for joy. What matters is the laughter it sparked, the worlds it opened, the imaginations it stirred, and the quiet way it refused to disappear. And so we stand in modern times looking back across the long and winding path it travelled, and the answer becomes clear. The Sega Master System is absolutely worth playing today, not because it conquered in the past, but because it continues in its own humble and extraordinary way to enrich the present. If you enjoyed this deep dive into gaming history, then consider subscribing for more stories of forgotten hardware, lost futures, and consoles that deserved better. You might like to click my video here covering the Sega Tower of Power. I'll see you all again soon.